Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where today I'm going to talk about power creep. Now, the sort of caveat for this video is I will be focusing heavily on Era 2 of Cold War, but that does not mean that the topic of power creep is local to Era 2. The entire game has seen power creep in different ways, in varying levels of severity over the last few years. This does apply to World War II, it applies to Cold War. I know that Tier 8 through Tier 10 recently, in the last 6 months, has seen its own set of, super powerful tanks. 249 is the latest on that list, which has, as far as I understand, demolished Tier 8 to Tier 10. But today, we're going to be focusing on Era 2 specifically. But before we do get onto the topic of power creep, I want to set the scene by talking about marks of excellence first. For those of you that are new to the game or my channel, you may not know what marks of excellence are. Well, you may have noticed in game that some tanks have red or white stars on their barrel, or they've got white rings around their belt, or gold rings even. If you're that good, gold stars. You may have noticed that some tanks have these things on their barrels that you don't have. These marks are called marks of excellence. Now, each tank in the game, tier 5 and above, can earn marks of excellence. So that means if you're playing tiers 1, 2, 3 and 4, you can't earn marks of excellence, which is a shame because I love the Matilda at tier 4. Can't earn marks on that one unless you can unless you play the tier 5 premium. But anyway, tier 5 and above is where marks of excellence start. To earn a mark of excellence, your performance in any given tank, tier 5 or above, remember, needs to be better than 65% of players in that particular tank for the last 2 weeks. If you're better than 65% of players, you'll earn your first mark. So if you're better than 65% of players, if your mark standing is 65.01, then you'll get your first mark. If it's an American tank, you get a white star. If it's a British tank, you get a white ring. If it's a Swedish tank, you get a yellow ring. Each mark for each nation looks slightly different, but if your damage standing is 65.01, then you will get your first mark. The second mark can be earned at 85%. Third mark can be earned at 95%, and the final and fourth mark can be earned at 100%. Given that these are achievements based on your performance, these are performance-based achievements over the last 2 weeks of your play compared to everybody else who's played that tank in the last 2 weeks, we as players can observe changes in each tier or era by looking at how easy it is today to earn a mark compared to yesterday or a month ago or 6 months ago or even 3 years ago. We can see changes in how easy it is to earn marks, and that is what gives us an idea of how the game fluctuates over time. And this is where we loop around to the original topic. 2 years ago, so we're talking early 2023, I was trying to 3-mark the BMP2, and it was very, very difficult to do. Very difficult to do. I reached a point where I thought this is near impossible for me because I'm just not good enough. I would get a phenomenal game, 12,000 combined, 11,000, 10,000 combined, and my mark would only move up by 0.2%. It was moving, but the amount of effort I was putting in, the performance I had to, the level of performance I had to achieve to just get that 0.2%, it reached a point for me I thought, you know what, this is just too stressful. I can achieve this result. I can get a 12k game, but I can't get a 12k game every single game. And that was what it took a couple of years ago to 3-mark. And the same applied to the Era 2 Scorpion 90 and the Armadillo, the T92, the Sheridan. Like I mentioned at the start, I'm focusing on Era 2 here. So it was very, very difficult to mark these tanks. because they're all good in their own ways. Maybe not the T92, that is bottom of era 2, but nonetheless it's still quite a sneaky tank. And for the most part, across all of these tanks that I've mentioned, the best I could do was a 2 mark. And that was, for me, that was a sign of just how competitive the game was. And to 3 mark something, 3 mark something, you had to be a phenomenal player. To gold mark something, to 4 mark it, you truly were the best of every player in the game in that particular tank. It was an incredible achievement. And this, having marks on your barrel, 2 marks was good. 3 marks was like, wow, this is that's a sign of respect right there. And 2 years ago, I was not, and to some extent, I still consider myself to still not be a phenomenally good player. 2 years ago, phenomenal players had 4 marks, 3 marks. That wasn't me, and I still don't consider myself to be a phenomenally good player. I'm not terrible, but I'm certainly not anywhere near the level of the best in this game. A few years ago, so again we're talking early 2023, 3 marks were a sign of a superb player. 4 marks were rare and were a sign of a fantastic, a great player. And for me, as someone who was just aspiring to just get better, the marks really felt like they meant something. They really felt like they meant something. When me and my friends would load into a game, and we'd look around, you've got the countdown timer, 20 seconds or whatever it is. You'd look around and you'd say, oh look, there's someone over there. They've got 3 marks on their barrel. Like, geez, they really know what they're doing. They have really worked out how to play that tank. They are good in this tank, and they are good consistently. Me and my friends, we think, all right, there's someone worth following. It's worth watching, see how they play. Where do they go? Because they clearly know what they're doing. They'd earn those marks in an incredibly difficult game. Fast forward to today, and it's a totally different story. All the tanks that I mentioned earlier, the ones where no matter how hard I tried, and I genuinely do mean this, and specifically I remember with the Armadillo, I was trying to 3 mark the Armadillo for years. I am not exaggerating. For years I had my mark at 91%, 92%. I just could not 3 mark. I just wasn't good enough. And I was okay with that because it meant that there was room for improvement. And it meant so much to me to know that, okay, I'm not good enough yet. I'm just not good enough. These guys that have 3 marked, they're better. I can improve. There's this feel of striving towards an achievement that is just out of my reach at the moment, but it means if I keep working hard, I can get there. All of the tanks that I've just mentioned to you, so the Scorpion 90, Armadillo, T92, I forget the BMP2, all of them are now 3 marked. BMP2 is gold marked. Now you might say, well, that's cause for celebration. The thing that you always wanted to achieve, you've done it. That's caused for you to celebrate. But for me, knowing how difficult this game used to be, and this is where it's sort of we're looping around to how the game is today. The game is not what it used to be. You used to have to be skilled, really skilled. You had to know exactly how to perform in a tank, and you had to perform not just once, not just twice. You had to perform at a high level, back to back, game after game, consistently in these tanks. And that was what was the sign of a fantastic player. Anyone can do well once. Broken clock is right twice a day. Anyone can get lucky once. But these top players with the highest marks, they were consistent with these amazing games, game after game, and that was what I was aspiring, that was what I was looking up to, looking forward to. And the reason I'm finding it, well, in a word, disappointing is I earned my third, and this is an example, I earned my third mark on the Scorpion 90. Again, another tank I just couldn't, I couldn't 3-mark it. I just couldn't. Other people out there were playing it better than me, playing it differently. They clearly knew something about it that I didn't. And no matter how hard I tried, I could not 3-mark the Scorpion 90. I was stuck on 2 marks. I think it was about a week ago, a couple of days ago, as of this recording, that a mediocre game of 4,000 damage combined was enough to 3-mark the Scorpion 90. And for me, looking back at the time in this game where you had to perform at a phenomenally high level, and now where an average result is enough to achieve the 3rd mark, it feels like a participation award. And that's why I'm making this video. This is why I'm talking about this. But why is this happening? Why was it so hard to earn tanks, but now it is so much easier? Well, this is where power creep comes in. The tanks that were once balanced have now been overtaken by more and more powerful vehicles being introduced into the tiers in which these vehicles play. And an example of how power creep has affected one era in Cold War and not the other is in fact Era 1. If you want to 3-mark the FV 4005, you have to be stupendously good at that tank. If you want to 3-mark the FV 107, you have to be stupendously good consistently. I have 3-marked the FV 107, but my mark has now dropped down to 92%. It is my favourite tank, and I cannot get it back up to 95%. I just can't. I'm not good enough again, and I'm okay with that. I like knowing that out there somewhere is a group of players that are consistently performing better than me. It means I can strive to achieve more. In Era 2, however, power creep has set in, and the balance has just gone. It's just been wiped out. The tanks that were once balanced, BMP-2, Scorpion 90, I'm talking specifically about light tanks in this example because I know them quite well, Sheridan, they have been overtaken by more and more powerful vehicles. The higher alpha, higher pen autocannons of the Marder, the Big Light Panzer and the Weasel have made tanks like the Sheridan, T-92 and the Scorpion 90 and even the BMP-2, they've made them relatively ineffective and redundant when they were once viable scouting options. And why are they redundant now? Well, it's because if you're going to go into a game, will you take the Big Light Panzer or will you take the Scorpion 90? I'm guaranteeing the majority of people will say, I'm taking the Bagel. It's got ATGMs. It's got that 40mm Bofors. Of course I'm going to take that. I'm not going to take a pop 90mm. No, I'm not going to do that. And this is where we see the change in the marks. People are simply not playing the tanks that I've mentioned. Scorpion 90, T-92, Sheridan, and so on. And because fewer people are playing them, there's less higher performance players in these tanks, which means the marks, the skill level required to 3-mark them has dropped. And this is what power creep has led to. People are no longer choosing to play these vehicles that were once balanced, because anyone who wants to just jump in and have fun is going to pick the Bagel over the Scorpion 90. Doesn't mean you can't have fun in the Scorpion 90, but you've got to try harder. You've got to think more. More effort is involved in doing well in the Scorpion 90 than it is in the Bagel. And this is what power creep has done to the game. People play these other tanks less and less. And that means the marks are easier to achieve because you don't have this large pool of players. Yes, you're going to have quite a lot of poor results, but at the opposite end, you're going to have a higher concentration of great results. And if the concentration of great results is higher, then the mark is going to be harder to achieve. But if you've got less and less people playing a tank, then it becomes easier to achieve the higher marks. And that is exactly why, for me, the achievements feel hollow because the competition is just not there anymore. And for me, it's like it feels like winning. You know, I've got the gold mark. Right, example, I've got the gold mark on the Sheridan. You could say, all right, you've won gold. But for me, the game in which I did 4-mark the Sheridan, it wasn't a bad game. I think it was 7,000 damage. Not bad, but not at the level that it used to have to be. I know that because, well, I played the Sheridan quite a lot. So I've won gold, but I don't feel like I've won gold because I'm the best of all the players in the game. I've been the best of the players in the last 2 weeks, but that doesn't mean I'm, you know, the best. And it's almost like I won gold not because I beat everyone else. I won gold because no one else showed up. And yes, I have the trophy, but I don't have the trophy because I bested the best. They just didn't. They happened to not show up. It's like, well, no one else is here. You may as well take gold. It's like, well, yeah, I got it, but it feels hollow. And this is, in my opinion, the result of power creep. New lines have come into the game, new tanks have come into the game that are just so much better than the lines that we already had. Now, this does sound like it's all a bit doom and gloom, but what I can say is that Wargaming have acknowledged that they need to address how tanks are balanced in this game. And I'm actually very, very happy knowing that they are aware of this issue. Unfortunately for us as the players, Wargaming do not release the Marks of Excellence information, so we will never know for sure how the numbers have actually changed over time. But for me, coming up to my 8th year in this game, I remember what things were like in the past. I remember how things used to be from a performance point of view, and I can see how things are now. It's an educated guess, but again, we don't have the information, so we will never actually know. But we can see what's going on. Veterans of the game can see it. What I can say, though, for sure, is that this power creep has created some serious imbalance in Era 2 specifically. Now remember, this is across the game. Tier 8 through Tier 10 has its issues. I think Era 1, for the most part, is okay. Some people feel differently about the 4005, but that's a separate issue. Era 2, Era 3, yeah, there are some, they did do some balance changes, but there is still, in my opinion, based on how the marks are right now, there is still some imbalance that does need addressing. But Wargaming have acknowledged that they will be looking at this. And that, for me, is very good news. They did also mention that they want to rebalance the entirety of Cold War by addressing some of the terrain resistance mechanics. I don't know exactly what that means or what it will look like in game, but at least we know that they are addressing the balance of Cold War, and their reason for addressing the balance of Cold War is they want the tank roles to be better defined. They want heavies to be more like heavies. So it's sort of the traditional, you know, a light tank is the scout. It's fast, maneuverable. You're not going to have an MBT keeping up with you. So light tanks can go off and scout. Heavies can shoot at what's been scouted rather than scouting their own target. So I don't know what that will look like in game. We'll have to see how things go. But I am pleased to know that Wargaming are aware of these issues and they are wanting to address them. I've wanted to make this video for a while, but I never really felt that I had the real evidence to, or the right vibe to bring to this video, because I didn't have what I think is the data. But now that I've got the marks on the T92, the Armadillo, the Scorpion 90, the Sheridan, all these tanks that were once insanely difficult and were on my list of one day, maybe, if I'm good enough, but it's just turned into have it anyway, whether you've, you know, I haven't really gotten better. I don't think I have. But I've got the marks now, and yeah, participation trophy. So hopefully this will be resolved by Wargaming's terrain resistance changes, or their future balance changes? I have no idea. I really have no idea, but I am glad to know that they are aware and are actively working on this in one way or another. We'll just have to see what comes. We'll have to see what they release. Okay, folks, that's all I've got for this one. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave it a like, if not a dislike. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one.